We believe the AMM model is still evolving. We don't think whatever AMM model we are seeing right now is the ultimate model. I don't think so.
So I believe in some sort of thin layer of regulation as a good way to stimulate adoption.
So the whole DeFi thing is probably not good for high frequency trading yet. Not there yet.
The Binance order book is the Bible. I'm not a religious person, but that is what's going to keep driving markets for the longest time, I believe.
Hello everyone, this is Meina, your crypto friend. Today, I'm really excited to have two DeFi founders, Alpha from Deri Protocol and Victor Ionescu from Hashflow joining my podcast. We had a really fun, technical, and meaningful conversation on DeFi designing, AMMs versus Orderbooks versus RFQs. Alpha is the co-founder of Deri Protocol. He worked on Wall Street on derivative pricing, trading, structuring, and risk management at Deutsche Bank, HBK Hedge Fund, Goldman Sachs. He also co-founded a quantitative hedge fund focused on traditional and crypto derivatives. Victor is a co-founder and CTO of Hashflow. He is a software veteran brewed in Silicon Valley, having led large-scale systems infrastructure projects and managed cross-functional teams at Airbnb, Facebook, and Google. The following content does not contain any financial advice. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining my podcast today, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic because we are talking about the very long debate or very long controversial topic on the DeFi designing choice of whether we should choose order books or AMMs or RFQs. And I'm also really excited to meet with you guys today because you guys both have a very strong technical background. So let's have a very technical discussion. Can each of you please provide a brief introduction to yourself as well as your project?
Hi, so my name is Victor Ionescu. I am a co-founder of Hashflow, which is a decentralized exchange built primarily on Ethereum and on other EVM chains. And at Hashflow, we built an RFQ system that leverages institutional market makers in order to create a DEX experience. And the reason we did that was to create a paradigm that solved for some of the issues that we saw in Uniswap initially, particularly centered around capital efficiency, MEV attacks, and not being able to price anything aside from spot assets. So we have a decentralized exchange with a model, which again, this is something that you're probably going to want to dive into, but our model is not a typical AMM model, but it's rather based on institutional market makers quoting by RFQ.
Yep. Thank you for the introduction.
This is my turn. Hello, everyone. This is OX Alpha. I'm the co-founder of Deri Protocol. So Deri Protocol is a DeFi protocol for derivatives, just as its name. Deri is the short for, actually, you might notice the first four letters of the derivatives. So currently we provide three kinds of derivatives, which is futures, options, and power purchase. Power purchase is actually a very new thing. Well, even the options that we provided here is everlasting options. It's not the classical kind. So you can get on our website, deri.io, to take a look at this pretty innovative derivatives. We are actually a very typical DeFi project, meaning we were doing things on-chain. So currently we are deployed on Arbitrum and Binance Smart Chain and the smart contract basis. And Deri Protocol is also based on the AMM paradigm, which means it basically, this is something we might explain in details later, but in short, it adopts a liquidity pool as the counterparty for your trading. So basically that's how AMM works. So happy to be in this program to discuss with Victor regarding all the different models about how to facilitate derivative trading for the crypto.
Thank you guys both for the detailed introduction. And of course, we're going to definitely dig into the more technical details about how your DeFi design works. But I know we are lacking a part here, which is order books, which we'll also touch. And before we dig into the technical details, let's discuss what DeFi actually means to the users. Because a lot of the average audience, they still don't know what DeFi is. What additional values does DeFi bring to the users when comparing to traditional finance?
Oh yeah, so I think DeFi, just by the name, it's pretty clear, right? It stands for decentralized finance. But then you might be asked, okay, why do we need decentralized finance? I think the short explanation is basically it decentralized the financial system just like Bitcoin decentralized money. So again, I guess the short answer to what's the added value for doing like that is basically the same thing as how do you think what's the added value for Bitcoin brings to the money system, right? And that is the similar value that the DeFi brings to the financial system. So yeah, of course, that's the very short answer. I think we can also go over into details during this conversation today.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because I think that's where it all starts, right? It all starts with the fact that Bitcoin created censorship-resistant money, fully decentralized, and it kind of perpetuated this whole philosophy of money, which is very much needed. But I think there's also a nuance here around what is DeFi philosophically and what can DeFi be in practice in order for it to scale, right? And I think philosophically, it's all about transparency. It's all about smart contract, code is law in a sense. The fact that it's decentralized and fully censorship resistant means that people have the same shot, right? So you have a system that's fully transparent. People have the same opportunity, and there's nothing that can stop you from doing things. It's the whole concept of permissionless trading, right? And I think it's kind of interesting that lately we've seen a lot of complications with that, right? So we're looking at Tornado Cash and OPEC sanctions and stuff. And on the one hand, censorship is bad. I think the whole ethos of our industry is that we want to make sure that we don't create the same financial system as before. But at the same time, you don't want terrorists to be able to move their money on DeFi because that's also really bad. So then, again, maybe this is a topic of like a future conversation, but I want to add a little bit of practical lens to this, which is I think in practice, there will be some sort of control, some sort of solution that we can collectively find against these bad actors. The way I think more about DeFi, I think of democratizing finance. What I mean by that, the very simple concept of a dollar is a dollar, right? So when you think of institutional investors in the US, they get deals for the startups, they get deals for the seed rounds and Series A's and so on. And they have that advantage that their money has access to products that normal people's money doesn't have access to, right? So then you have your Sequoia that can get into a seed round of name a successful company, Silicon Valley, and 1,000x their money. But then you have someone who lives in a normal kind of lower class or middle class kind of family in the States who's not what we call a creative investor, doesn't have access to the same things, right? So I think from a practical standpoint, no matter how this converges, in my opinion, DeFi is supposed to do two things. A, it's supposed to allow access for people to invest their money in a very fair way. And B, it's supposed to bring transparency and balance in checks, right? And remove the obscurity of middlemen such as Celsius and things that happen behind closed doors. And then the rest, obviously, it's up to interpretation. But I would say practically, I think it's about access and transparency.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I really like the idea you said, a dollar is a dollar. It's not only the way that people can have a more fair access or transparency, different financial services. It's also about how you deploy your money or what the money value actually means. I don't want to touch on whether one USDT or one USDC, what it means in the whole monetary system. But another thing is, if you have a centralized party, let's say a bank or the country, they can always print more money. So money, I think essentially philosophically, it's a concept, right? How much purchasing value does it have? And now we are seeing crazy inflation rate. I think when we talk about money, those things all should be taken into consideration. But of course, this conversation is not around that. So let's save that for a future conversation. But thank you for bringing up that point. Do you have anything to add on? OX Alpha?
Actually, yes, because a lot of focus is put into money, but I think DeFi is more than that. It's not just money. Like I said, Bitcoin was the one that decentralized money. where DeFi is the thing that decentralizes the whole financial system. So not just the money part is decentralized, now the whole financial system, because the whole financial system is not just about money, right? It's not just about I pay you like $1, so I should make that thing consensus resistance. So that's what actually the concept that Bitcoin brings to this world. But now it's actually a little more than that. I think just now Victor bring a very interesting term. He said it democratized the finance, right? So actually, I like this term very much. When it comes to how it works, it actually has another very meaningful significance that it democratized the finance. I wrote an article actually discussing about that topic. So for example, how people like make money in the financial systems. For example, Uniswap. So this is the first time that regular people, the Main Street people, not just the Wall Street people, they can participate in the business of providing liquidity to sort of trading. So if we just look at the traditional financial world, so this business is only open to a very small group of people, which are no more than 10 high-frequency trading company in the US. They basically monopolize this part of the business. And this is a very profiting business. And in the crypto, the system has been democratized a little bit, meaning, for example, a lot of exchange actually, I'm talking about centralized exchange in the crypto world, they actually divide the trades into a maker and a taker so that sometimes the maker can share some of the transaction fee that the taker pays. So actually that democratizes things a little bit, meaning if we are willing to participate in providing liquidity to facilitate trades, then you can share that profit, right? But when it comes to the DeFi world, for example, Uniswap, actually everybody can provide, you provide some Ethereum, provide some USDC, then you are facilitating the trading between Ether and USDC. So it's just as simple as that. The mainstream people can do it. That is one excellent example of how to democratize, using Victor's word, how to democratize the finance. And that's way more than just decentralized money, because the whole financial system on top of the money is the most important thing, of course, is the foundation. But there are a lot of things on top of this money transferring. There are borrow, spot, exchange, there are derivative trading, there are insurance, there are wealth management, a lot of things. These are usually been monopolized by the big companies on the Wall Street, but now they are all democratized. So we can never exaggerate the point of this part that DeFi bring to the financial world.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I think Alpha described the Uniswap LP that just adds another dimension. It's kind of beautiful, right? Like anyone can just do it, not just a bunch of folks that have firms. I think that's the whole ethos of it, right? As long as you're a good actor, it's access for everyone.
I think that the more problem is how do we get more users, or how do we make users realize now they have more choice using DeFi versus traditional finance. But that's an overall industry problem need to be solved.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that for another 2 hours, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to our next question. I think it's also related, right? What inspired you to create your project in the very first place? Maybe talk about this integrating with your background a bit. What is the backstory when you found your project, your company?
So I think I touched a little bit on when I was describing it on this, but I want to mention Uniswap again because I think their contribution to this space has been phenomenal. In my opinion, Uniswap took DeFi from 0 to 1. And the reason it took it from 0 to 1 is because they created the most important paradigm in a tokenized world, which is liquidity, right? So all of a sudden, Uniswap was created. People could create pools, again, in a permissionless way. Anyone can provide liquidity into these pools, and they would create markets, right? And that was beautiful because people knew that whenever they wanted to exchange their tokens for something, they'd just go to Uniswap and change them. But obviously, it came with a bunch of issues. In 2020, as the Ethereum gas started going up, we saw a bunch of problems in the space. And I think one of them was the fact that Uniswap itself is an AMM, and I think at that point we had B2. And one obvious problem was the fact that slippage is a thing, right? So slippage, maybe for some people in the audience, slippage is basically when you think of a particular price that you're going to get on the trade, and at the execution time, the price that you end up getting is somewhat different. It could go up or it could go usually down. right? So you usually get less than what you thought you would get.
Yep.
And the reason this happens is because Uniswap's availability paradigm relies on the fact that pricing happens on chain. And because it happens on chain, it's perpetually available. What that means, however, is that you don't know exactly what price you're going to get until your transaction executes on the blockchain. And this created a lot of issues where people were diving into MEV and what it meant for people to, I think the first MEV bots were kind of trying to game gas prices to try to place some transactions, some in front of what your transaction and some transactions behind. And they were kind of playing with that. And then people did a bit more research into this and flashbots came to life. But anyway, from our standpoint, we really hated the term slippage because we just didn't like the fact that we didn't know what we were going to get from a trading perspective, right? Another problem that we saw was that these markets were not very capital efficient. So turnover ratios, aka trading volume that you get per liquidity parked into the pools, were very, very low and oftentimes sub-unitary. And this was like the capital efficiency problem again became a thing like beginning of 2021. There was the whole DeFi 2.0 concept where protocols started investing in capital efficiency, and then Uniswap v3 came out, and that was like way more capital efficient. Again, Uniswap worked on this, but capital efficiency was an issue. And it translated into the last thing here, which is, or the quick conversation, like, maybe Alpha is going to be hit home for you, but we really want to price things like exotic asset structure products. Why do we think that's important for DeFi? So in order for institutions and other players to come in, they need to manage risk. And in traditional finance, these exotic products are used primarily to manage risk. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation and so on, but without really good structured products, you can't really manage risk properly. And obviously, pricing options on Uniswap v2, v3 has been a total nightmare. People have tried a little bit with it. So we're like, okay, you know what? Price discovery, generally, there's different philosophical answers to this, but price discovery for crypto assets happens off-chain. Like my general feel is it happens on Binance, it happens on Coinbase, it happens on these venues, and the reason it happens there obviously is because they have a ton of liquidity. And it happens off-chain. It's driven by these market makers, institutional market makers. They're kind of creating a liquidity mesh between these different exchanges. So we were thinking, like, why not just take those institutional market makers and have them quote the same things on-chain, use the same market-making tactics that they've always used, which is like buy here and sell here and they make money on the spread, and try to create these quotes that are just kind of zero slippage, so set in stone, right? And also, if you really want to price an options using some sort of binomial model, you can totally do that as well, because all of a sudden you don't need liquidity to be able to price, right? All you need in order to sell 1 ETH is 1 ETH, right? So that was generally the reason why we started. Obviously, with the architecture, we noticed there were some other nice things to have, like our gas was much lower than all the other exchanges, and people really liked that when Ethereum was having a gas problem. But this was not to destroy the AMM. So I think AMM is a very important concept. If you look at 1inch right now, in terms of like what the protocols are that are giving you the best rates on something like ETH to USDC, it's going to be us and it's going to be Uniswap v3. And I think these models are going to keep each other in check, but we wanted to create a new paradigm that allows for somewhat better execution. Obviously, there's a trade-off, trading off a little bit of decentralization and putting it in the hands of market makers. But that's why we really wanted to build this product, to see how it would be if we could make it possible for people to trade with no slippage.
Great. Thank you for the very detailed answer. And now I would like to give the microphone to Alpha. And I certainly want to hear your thoughts about the slippage, because of course I think AMM has the slippage problem and everybody knows that.
Okay, so, well, first of all, are we still in this introductory stage, so that we need to start like the story because there are some...
Yeah. Let's do the introduction piece and then...
that I would need to...
Yep.
Okay, so is to start from background. As we talked about in the chit chat, I was a physicist by education. I actually got my physics PhD, but after that I went to investment banks to do all the kinds of derivative things. So basically the pricing or trading and the structuring and risk management of derivatives. So that's what I've been doing in my days in the so-called classical finance. Right before I dived into the crypto world, so I was running a quantitative hedge fund, but that was like when 2017, 2018. So we started to adapt some of our trading strategies into trading the crypto. Well, basically Bitcoin and Ethereum. So that was the pretty much only things that you can trade with a quantitative model. But then I think it was in 2019 or so, we also provide some market making service for basically the centralized derivative exchange. So we basically play the role of the market makers. So that was a time when we would understand the market making business of crypto in a very practical way. So that actually prepared us for the later DeFi project. So in 2020, when this DeFi summer thing just emerged, then I basically what we're doing right now was inspired by Uniswap too. So, because basically Uniswap is, as you know, the most representative AMM, which is a central topic here today, right? So AMM does a very simple thing. It basically adopts a liquidity pool, which serves as a counterpart when you want to trade something, right? So it's just in the Uniswap case, it has two reserves. One reserve a token X and the other reserve a token Y. So if you give it the token X, it will give you some token Y. If you give it token Y, it will give you some token X. As simple as that. So that's basically how an AMM works for spot trading. So the liquidity pool is playing the role of counterparty. We just bring that very simple concept of liquidity pool playing the role of counterparty into derivative trading. So that actually is the model that we're doing right now. So the liquidity pool is actually playing the role whenever the traders wants to play the role of counterparty to for the trader wants to say long Bitcoin futures or short a Ethereum options or like long a Bitcoin power perps or all kind of different derivative trading demands. So that's how it works. I think the AMM model is still evolving. For example, Victor mentioned when you started, you spot all this kind of problem of the traditional constant product market making, the X times Y equals to K model. It has a lot of issues, right? But also it evolves to the Uniswap V3, which brings in the concentrated liquidity model that actually substantially enhanced the capital efficiency. The capital efficiency is almost as good as a traditional order book. It's not just the capital efficiency, it's also a price discovery mechanism too, because this is one thing I also discussed in another article of mine. So so price discovery is basically about how to bring in the market information from other marketplace, right? So there are basically several ways to bring in the market information from other marketplace. So you can, for example, use Oracle, which is what we are doing. So this approach, I think, was invented by Dodo with their special AMM model called PMM. So Deri Protocol is actually running on an adopted version of PMM, which we call DPMM, which stands for either a Deri PMM or derivative PMM, because it's a PMM version adopted for derivative trading. So is one way you can bring in the external information. Also, for example, in the Uniswap V3 actually adopts a very special model when the LPs add the range orders. That range orders naturally brings in the external market information. So just put some examples about how to enhance the capital efficiency and also accelerate the price discovery procedure. But we believe, well, by we, I mean, myself and a lot of other people working in this industry, we talk about a lot. We believe the AMM model is still evolving. We don't think whatever AMM model we are seeing right now is the ultimate model. I don't think so yet. Even as of now, the AMM model, it already displays the very superior features for a lot of things, not just for price discovery or capital efficiency. Actually, capital efficiency is one thing. I think it has been criticized before, maybe at the traditional constant product market maker model. But right now, we have a lot of ways to enhance the capital efficiency. Actually, there are things that we can do under the AMM model that cannot be done under the traditional way. For example, in Deri Protocol, one liquidity pool can serve trades for tens of different trading symbols. For example, right now, the liquidity pool we deployed on Arbitrum or we deployed on Ionescu chain, it simultaneously serves the trade of Bitcoin and Ethereum's futures, options, and power perps. That's almost 20 trading symbols. When I'm saying it serves the trading for nearly 20 trading symbols, I mean these 20 trading symbols actually share the same piece of liquidity. That's a huge enhancement of the capital efficiency, right? For example, in the traditional financial, the most typical trading paradigm order book, every single trading symbol has its own piece of liquidity. You cannot share liquidity across different trading symbols because every single has their dedicated order book, right? So that order book is a piece of liquidity. You cannot share liquidity across different trading symbols. So this is one example of the things that can be done under the AMM model, but cannot be done in the traditional finance model. That's huge optimization of capital efficiency. I think that's how I see this AMM framework works.
Got it. I mean, certainly, I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned the advantage of AMMs or the potential future growth of it, but you still haven't touched on the slippage problem. So I guess we all know that AMMs are evolving, but does it, when we compete AMM with Orderbooks or with RFQs, we kind of have to admit that the slippage problem is worse than the two other parties, right? Or
okay, slippage. I think so first of all, Victor just explained what slippage means. So I think there are two factors affecting the slippage. One is the time, how quickly the system can execute your trade, right? So when you initialize the trade, and from the time point when you send order to the point that is executed, if that time is too long, so then your slippage is big, right? So that can be naturally optimized when the blockchain infrastructure optimized. For example, if now you are doing things on a faster networks, for example, layer 2 like Arbitrum, then that's not a huge problem at all. So, well, when I say this is not a problem, it's definitely not a problem for regular traders. I'm not including high frequency traders who is so demanding on that. Okay, so it's probably the whole DeFi thing is probably not good for high frequency trading yet. Not there yet.
Okay.
Problem lemon, I don't know. But for regular traders, that's good enough. So that's one thing. The other thing is when you trade, because you are following the terminology by a lot of exchange, you are consuming or taking the liquidities, right? So if at that price range, there are not many liquidity that people put there, then when you trade, you will push price a lot, right? When you are buying, you will push price up. In the traditional way, in the order book, all the ask close at that price range have been taken out by you, then you are pushing the price up a lot. So this is a matter of how much liquidity you can put into the price region around the counter price. So this is not a problem of AMM. It's just a matter of maybe in the old AMM way, because, for example, the traditional constant product market making way, it just lay out the liquidity cover from the price region from 0 to infinity. So at every particular price point, there's not much liquidity around that price region. That probably causes some slippage issue. But if you look at the new model, for example, the PMM brought up by Dodo, so it actually has liquidity concentrated around the current market price, or the Uniswap 3, because the range order, people want to make their capital more efficiently used, they will have the liquidity concentrated around the current market price. Also, in the Deri Protocol model, liquidity will be concentrated around market price too. All these newer AMM models all has their own way to concentrate liquidity around market price. So that will reduce slippage a lot, just as much as how the traditional order book reduces slippage.
Got it. Thank you for the very detailed explanation. And Victor, I think for the RFQ, I think you already clearly explained what it does, but that also introduces another problem is because you are requesting the quotes from those different market makers, right? Then the transaction price or the actually matches are not transparent. You are not providing transparent information to the users. How would you comment on that?
Are you able to expand on that?
Meaning,
I wanted to ask that too.
Okay, so I think like for AMMs, right, the users knows how it works because it's based on like how they design the protocol, whether it's like x times y equals a k, the constant, or even for order books, the users can see what are the orders, what are the bids, so the information are transparent. But for RFQs, you are requesting from market makers, so the information for that piece is not transparent to the users.
The user doesn't care. So the user only cares about one thing, which is how much money they're going to get for the trade, right? So as a trader, your main purpose is to make money, right? Where that kind of comes from doesn't really matter as long as you have good execution, right? So there are things that the trader would care, right? And I don't think that transparency of the order book is one of them. But let me explain what could be the things that traders care about. Well, namely one thing, which is whether they get a quote or not, right? So this whole model is, and kind of diving back into AMM, I think there's a scale of solutions. Like the most primal way of designing the AMM is a simple supply demand, right? So philosophically, you can say, okay, an AMM is a depiction of true supply and demand, right? Why is that an important concept? It's an important concept because that's technically what price is, right? So when you think of a price of something, it's worth as much as someone would pay for it, right? Obviously, the life is way more complicated than that, right? And then Alpha is talking about concentrated liquidity, which is kind of alleviating a lot of these issues with true supply-demand curves. But if you look at it, it's basically adding another extra management layer. So the more you want to get away from the true supply demand issues, the more management you add. So the more you're kind of converging to this point where we are in our RFQ, which is basically just do everything in a bespoke way, right? So again, these are different paradigms on a spectrum. Now, the RFQ model, because it goes off chain, has this potential issue where, as a trader, you have to go to this hoop of market maker wanting to give you a quote. That process in our case happens off chain. So technically, the market maker can reject you as a trader, right? That is something that you might want to worry about, right? Because you want to trade, try to get a quote, you can't get a quote. However, once you've received a quote, what you have in that is exactly what you're trying to get. And at that point, you don't care whether it's how the market maker hedges. You don't care how this price was computed. What you care about is that once you sell that 1 ETH, you're going to get 2,000 USDC, and that's about it, right? So general feel is it's kind of like OTC trading, like when you're trying to buy $10 million worth of ETH. You don't really care how the market maker is going to make their books neutral. You don't care about what their execution strategy is going to be. You care about, hey, how much ETH can I really buy for this $10 million? And yeah, that's my short answer. There's different trade-offs here that we took, and obviously, I could talk more about it. I think it's out of scope for this question. I can talk more about why I think those trade-offs are really a feature, not a bug. But yeah.
Do you have anything to add on before we move to the next question, Alpha?
But actually, yeah. So when you say traders is concerned about when I trade, when I get a quote, I need to know that I can execute against that quote, right? But isn't that something that's already in the order book framework? For example, so let's say I want to buy Bitcoin. So I see some quotes listed there on the order book. So they're actually standing by there for me to hit. right? Versus the RFQ model, there's no standing by clause for me to fee, or rather instead, I need to like send a request for so that as a response, the market makers will send back their like what their asks or their bids are back to me, then I field orders against. So isn't the first way more straightforward for the traders to like look at, okay, what they see is what they can get, instead of like I need to go through a
I think I understand. I think I understand what you're trying to say. So essentially in an order book, you can see the order book, right? Like you see like, this is the order book. I know roughly what to expect because these are the taker orders, right? So if I take a trade taker side, this is how I get. Well, there are some issues, obviously, like the fact that there's race conditions on an order book. Let's just assume that those are kind of minimal. Even though, to draw a parallel to that, if you look at crypto trading, right? If you look at Binance or any like large exchange, you're going to think that ETH has a ton of liquidity, right? And you're going to think, oh, this is such a liquid asset, ETH to USD, right? Now, what happens is the moment you try to execute a large trade against it, people are going to start pulling their quotes in. So you end up getting insane price action on a trade. So I think order books themselves don't really guarantee that you're going to get that execution. That's one thing, right? The other thing is...
So you're saying what I just said, though, what you see is what you can get is not exactly correct on a lot of the order books.
It would be correct if you were to take a snapshot and you have a guarantee that you could take those orders. But in reality, as you start taking those orders, things are going to change because it's a speed of light kind of race between you and the market makers at that point, right? Which, again, it's fine. So we can assume that the order book is stagnant for the purpose of this question because I think it's the same thing.
There's a lot of like spoofing on the order books.
Sorry?
If this is like done intentionally, then this is called spoofing, which is a crime in the traditional finance. You're saying there's a lot of spoofing?
Like the centralized exchanges are actually thinking on
No.
delusional.
There to sell that you think there's will be liquidity there, but when you like sending your order, try to catch those orders, I will take it out. So
I don't think
that's called spoofing. Are you saying?
I don't think it's spoofing. No. I guess what I'm talking about is, so if you try to trade a lot on the taker side, what's generally going to happen is the market makers, you and the market makers are going to be going against each other, right? So it's not about spoofing, like the exchanges aren't supposed to match the orders. It's more about everyone kind of tries to get a good deal out of it. So like people are going to have like fill messages, for example, market makers are going to try to get those fill messages right away and try to figure out exactly how the order book works. This is all high frequency, right? So they're going to cancel orders, they're going to put back orders again. The point I'm trying to make is like, even if you're like looking, say you have like $5 million worth of depth, right, around a specific spread, like on Binance, what happens, again, I'm not talking about it theoretically, I'm talking about observed executions on chain. I talk to people like try to make these trades, right? What happens if you actually try to trade that against the spread, you're going to get way more price action than you normally would anticipate to get. Because again, it's not just you, it's other people as the market makers. Everyone's competing for the same pot. And the only thing that really differentiates is your speed of execution on the CPU side, and it's also speed of light of connection to the exchange, right? Again, I think that's more of a tangent to your question because your question still stands, right? Like, how is this better than the order book? What's the shortcoming of this relative to seeing the order book and kind of having some sort of anticipation around it? And actually, as it turns out, so market makers, their prices are similar to an order book, right? When they give you a quote, they have some sort of internal thinking that emulates an order book. And that internal thinking is what we call indicative pricing, right? So this is not something that we advertise a lot on the website. Again, we're building, but this indicative pricing helps things like aggregators, for example, helps people like 1inch decide whether they want to route trace rather in the first place. And they have to query this like really, really fast. Again, we're not talking high frequency trading fast, we're talking really fast DeFi standards, right? And they wouldn't get signed orders for all these things. They want to understand the liquidity. So I think in a sense, we already have this data, right? It's not visually distributed to the trader, but it could be. We use it internally and some of our aggregators use it. So it's kind of similar. Again, the one thing that kills me in DeFi, and this is going to be a problem for a long time as we kind of scale up to the layers, is lag. Like there's always going to be price changes. There's always going to be issues there. And I don't think we can truly get around as long as we have on-chain execution. But one of the first principles that I'm employing, and again, this works well with concentrated liquidity too. And I'm a big fan of constraint liquidity paradigm, by the way. Like I said, I'm not trying to kill the AMM. I'm trying to complement the AMM, right? But one of the first principles that I'm taking is whatever I'm building has to work on Ethereum, right? If it doesn't work on Ethereum, I have a problem. And a lot of things might not work on Ethereum for different reasons. Like one of them, super important, is the gas you have to pay to manage the books, right? Like if that becomes untenable, then the protocol is no longer profitable on Ethereum. So those are things that like we kind of try to do. Again, Uniswap v3 does a really good job on Ethereum. So again, AMMs are proven on Ethereum. I think it will be. I don't think transparency is much of an issue. I think execution is really what it boils down to. Traders will want a good execution.
Can I try to repeat to see if I understand this correct? So just now you mentioned, so if we were able to like make a snapshot of the order book and trade against that snapshot of the order book, say for Binance, then that would be perfect. But in practice, because the order books are like a very volatile dynamics changing all the time, so you can't not really make a snapshot and trade against it. And what you guys doing here by the RFQ mechanism is try to make a snapshot. So, using the analog is try to make a snapshot of the order book so that for whatever sent back to the traders, so that liquidity as a response to the request, that's the snapshot, right? So that snapshot is something for sure you can trade against rather than
the quote is guaranteed.
Volatile order book. Is that a point? That's basically how this thing
exactly
works, right?
Exactly right. So it's a guaranteed quote, but obviously that doesn't mean that it's a snapshot of the book because it's the market maker's view on what they would need to make a profit on the hedging trade. But that turns to be a extrapolation of the order book that they have access to on different venues, right?
So I have used a lot of centralized exchanges, and I realized that the problem that you were referring to is like when you're trying to execute maybe a larger trade, you don't get it, the order doesn't get executed, right? But I haven't tried your product yet. So are you saying basically no matter how large or how small the order gonna be, right, it will always gonna be filled based on the quotes that you get?
Well, it depends on how large we're talking, right? Like if we're talking $10 million, it might be a little we actually did do, we started offering recently trades up to $10 million with zero slippage on Ethereum. But generally, I think yes. So the idea is, as long as there's liquidity in the pool, so we use a pool system, and this is Alpha, like you were mentioning that you have like a really cool capital efficiency and asset model where you can put n assets into the pool. We use the same thing. I think that's like very, very smart. It's really impressive you guys built that. But as long as there's liquidity and there's a signature on the quote, you'll be able to trade. And that's because once the market maker sees the fill, they can hedge on a counter venue. So yes.
Cool.
And obviously there's an expiration.
I'm guessing the answer to Meina's question is like this mechanism actually leave that question to the market maker, right? So as long as they are willing to take this order and as long as they give their price, then is something that can be guaranteed. Like, am I right?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So,
and it expires after a while, so like they're not going to give this to you forever. Like the actual signature of the payload of the quote includes an expiration, and the smart contracts will check for that expiration. But that's generally enough for like a normal trading flow where you have like a few seconds to see if you want like the quote, and then get like some wallet signature time and so on. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you guys for explaining all the details to me. But then let's go back to what the user needs a bit, right? Because I think all of us, we just talk about what the trader needs, or what are the factors do we really need to optimize for when you design a DeFi protocol. But before that, we need to think about who the target users are, because of course different groups of users, they have different needs, right? So can you guys please talk about like who your target users are, and based on that, like what are the factors that you are trying to optimizing for your protocol?
I guess Deri Protocol is to serve, if we put this in a very simple way, Deri Protocol is to serve the Web3 users. So, well, that sounds like a marketing cliche, but actually it is really what we're doing, because what does mean a Web3 user? It means people are like doing things in a Web3 way. They are transferring money on either by Bitcoin or on Ethereum network or on the blockchain network. They might, they are probably like, for example, collecting NFTs as collectibles, things like that. So when they're doing all these like Web3 activities, part of the Web3 activities are, in some of the scenarios, they will have some financial demands. They need to like borrow money, or they need to like exchange one token into another kind of tokens, or they need to like manage the risk. They need to hedge risk, or they need to hedge on something to get more risk exposures. But under the Web3 scenario, when they want to do these kind of things, they cannot just go back to the Web2 mechanism, right? For example, they cannot just go back to a centralized exchange like a Binance to finish their trades. So that is what Deri Protocol. So how Deri Protocol will be used. So whenever in a Web3 scenario, a Web3 users need to have some financial demands that needs to be served, they can use Deri Protocol. When I say they can use Deri Protocol, it does not necessarily mean they use Deri Protocol directly. They might or might not be using Deri Protocol directly. By using Deri directly, I mean they actually, like, for example, go to the deri.io website to long futures, like to short options, things like that. That's probably the very direct way of using Deri Protocol. But there are also other indirect way. For example, right now there are a lot of community developed products that's based on Deri Protocol. Also, there are other things will be rolled out by Deri Protocol and other DeFi protocols. For example, something that will come out very soon, there will be liquidity mining products without implement loans, things like that. So for all of those products, when people are using them, they might not be dealing with Deri Protocol directly, but actually under the hood, they are using Deri Protocol. So that's another way. That's also a very typical Web3 scenario where people needs to use Deri Protocol, needs to use derivatives, maybe not directly, but use it under the hood. So those are the typical users that Deri Protocol is targeting at.
So basically, you're saying you are truly focusing on the ethos or the spirit of decentralized finance. So you want the users who understand like what Web3 is. I mean, that's how I get from what you just talked about, right?
Well, basically I'm saying people who are doing things in a Web3 way, they don't necessarily understand Deri Protocol. Well, when they are like using Deri Protocol directly, for example, just now I mentioned when you go to deri.io to trade futures or to trade options, you probably need to like have a fairly well understanding about Deri Protocol itself. But if you are like using something like a more end product which has Deri Protocol as a module under the hood, then you probably don't need to understand Deri Protocol at all, or you don't even know you don't even need to know the existence of Deri Protocol under the hood. But overall, I think people who need to use Deri Protocol is those who are doing things in the Web3 way. For example, you hold your assets in a wallet, and you want to wealth management on-chain, or you want to hedge your risk on-chain, things like that. All of these are, in my knowledge, are called you are doing things in the Web3 way. So I think those are the scenarios where we want to serve people's financial demands.
What you are referring here, the Web3 way, is like, okay, it's decentralized, it's more transparent, it's more accessible, it's permissionless, it's all those like, I guess a lot often talked benefits of Web3, and then in the Web3 way, the user's gonna be benefiting from that, right?
Yes, okay. Yes, exactly.
And now, Victor, do you want to talk about your target audience a bit?
I mean, very much that, right? Like if you think of one of the core principles, which is whatever's accessible to institutions should be accessible to retail traders and normal people, then I would say, okay, Hashflow is creating a really good product for institutions, right? Like it's creating an OTC product. It allows people to price exotic assets and so on. But it doesn't really mean, I mean, everything that's like good enough for institutions should be good enough for retail traders, in my opinion, right? Like retail traders are now more sophisticated than the banks and so on, right? So if you build something that's good enough for the bank, like similar to Deri, like you build something that's good enough for all the users, so API users and so on, the wealth management platforms, then all those products are going to be good for the users that really want to learn and really want to manage those things like firsthand. I think one thing I want to add though on the Hashflow side is so I believe in some sort of thin layer of regulation as a good way to stimulate adoption, right? So I don't think, if you look throughout history, I don't think anything has had mass adoption without being much regulated, because things that, there's always a way to generate resistance and kind of go against the government and so on. There's always a way to do that. I don't think there's a way to do that and gain mass adoption. I think that's the problem, right? So I think in order for crypto to kind of gain traction, and I think it's important for crypto to gain traction because right now the liquidity that we deal with in DeFi is very, very small. We have nothing compared to TradFi, right? And the more you increase TVL, the more liquid those markets are, right? So I think when we built Hashflow, we built it so that if we were to add regulation, again, this is a double-edged sword, right? Because you don't know what you're regulating. Like, you have to be really careful to not get to the point where you're really oppressing people and so on. But if you wanted to add regulation, you could technically do that, right? Because every single action that people take on Hashflow has to be signed off chain. And as part of the signature process, you can add infinite layers of middleware that tell you whether you want to really sign it, right? What does that mean? We are able to create clean liquidity sources, right? So if, for example, institution A says, I only want to take money from KYC people in the United States of America, we can build that, right? By integrating middleware that only allows KYC people from the United States of America to deposit at pool, right? Again, we don't want to do KYC. We don't want to add any extra crazy things. There are some things we want to stop. Like we don't want child abusers. We don't want terrorists. We don't want any of that stuff. But aside from that, we don't have a lot of opinions, right? We do, however, plan on being compliant with jurisdictions as they roll out different regulations. I think that's one important point I want to make. The second thing is our model of RFQ scales amazingly well cross-chain. So we built this year, we released it, which we have the same execution model for cross-chain trading, where you get a quote, say ETH to BNB, you send ETH on Ethereum, you get BNB on BNB chain. It doesn't matter how long the bridging process takes, you get your rate is guaranteed. Now, I don't think cross-chain trading should become the norm. I really don't think people should trade cross-chain that much. However, when they do need to trade cross-chain, we plan on being there for them. So I think that's another niche of customers that we're looking to acquire. But if you were to look at this right across the board, it is DeFi users. And I think it's a very important principle in DeFi that every user is regarded in the same way and it has access to the same instruments, right? So if you build for one, you build for all, in a sense.
So it sounds like I don't want to say you're trying to meet users and the institutions in the middle way, but if you're adding more layers to that is the case. And so you are not only, I guess, providing more choices to the institution or the business layer, but also on the other hand, you are giving also more choices to the users. Is that what you are trying to do? Or is that a good summarization?
We're giving an alternative choice. I mean, user can always trade in other venues, right? What we really want to bring is institutional access to the users. So all the counterparties that are market making on Hashflow are institutions. So we were born with institutions in mind. Now, once you have institutional market making and liquidity, you can have institutional clients because they trade with each other, they make market with each other. They play together, right? Like those are the 10 people that are playing together. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that I can play with them, right? Or you can play with them. So yes, it is an institutional paradigm to DeFi. And again, some institutions also play on Uniswap. And pretty sure there's a lot of them play on Deri too, because when you're talking derivatives, there's only so many people that create derivatives markets, right? But it's just one architectural system, one paradigm, which we think scales really well and can bring DeFi forward. And again, I'm excited to see what happens. I do think there's space for all these players on DeFi. I think order books are very interesting. We don't have any order books. I think order books have their place too. They've always had. But yeah, that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah, all the centralized exchanges, they're using Orderbooks system. And
they will keep using them.
Yeah.
I just don't think they should ever be on chain. But Orderbooks are super important.
and yeah, I think they have the most liquidity, isn't it? For out of everything.
Yeah. The Binance order book is the Bible. Like I'm not a religious person, but that is what's going to keep driving markets for the longest time, I believe.
For the longest time.
I just one thing I don't believe in Workout's order books is order books on chain, right? Like we work with these market makers in a lot of experiments. Even networks like Solana, when the chain gets clogged and it has some issues for whatever reason, your life as a market maker becomes hell. And but the order books on centralized exchanges, 100%. And then there's also this kind of world where we keep adding layers, layer 3, layer 4, whatever, and you secure everything on the underlying layer, and it all kind of trickles down to Ethereum. In that case, like, I'm not sure. I'm curious what your opinion is on this, Alpha. Like, but my opinion is that you can actually get to things very similar to high frequency trading by creating like a layer N, and then you kind of have like a layer that's a very centralized version, kind of like how Arbitrum has their own sequencer and so on. You can have like ultra centralized layers that technically, in theory, can settle all the way down to Ethereum. Again, I'm not saying like we're going to work on that or anything, but theoretically, I think you can get the way faster execution while preserving the security. Again, trade-off is going to be censorship, which translates into a centralized system, right?
Well, actually, yeah. So when people talk about like layer 2 or people talk about blockchain, usually people mix different things. So for example, dYdX, right now people talk about dYdX as a layer 2 based order book system, right? And going forward, if they just implement what they claim they will do in the V4, they will have the match engine, the order book based on the standalone, the Cosmos based blockchain, right? Which is essentially layer 1, right? So while these are indeed, you can say it's layer, the current version is layer 2 and the future version is a layer 1 blockchain. All of them are like standalone layer 2 or standalone layer 1, which is really different things which is just another species, another kind of animals, different from what we're talking about, Ethereum kind of a layer 1 or Arbitrum or optimistic kind of layer 2. I guess we can call it harmonic layer 2, right? So if you put your things in a standalone server, which right now is a AWS server for dYdX, and you use some layer 2 technology, for example, Stockware, to connect your server to the Ethereum. Well, it's true that is adopting some layer 2 technology, but it's not really the same kind of thing as we're talking about layer 2, the kind of layer 2 like Arbitrum or Optimistic or the StockNet that the Stockware company is doing, right? So it's a really different thing. So I think it's really a variant of a centralized exchange. So basically, there's no difference between, like, for example, dYdX and Binance Futures, except that they like write back some of their settlement information back to the Ethereum. That's the only difference. Well, there are two differences. Yeah. One difference is this that I mentioned. The other difference, they're like they don't have a KYC system, right? They don't have an account system. You just put your money into the system through smart contracts. So these are the only two differences. Besides that, there's
they could if they wanted to, right?
That's So I think that's like how they compete with the real centralized exchange. But my prediction about like this direction of the industry is that if this direction is proved to be a very efficient way to serve the trading. For example, the high frequency trading that we're talking about. I think right now the trading on the dYdX is pretty high frequency, maybe not as high as the trading on like Binance Smart Chain or like Bybit or FTX, but it's pretty high. But if they go to like this Cosmos standalone blockchain and make their match engine, the order book, very technically efficient, I think that's probably the day when all those traditional centralized exchange like switch to this direction, because there's nothing that blocks, for example, Binance Futures or FTX or Bybit, BitMEX, Deribit. There's nothing blocked them to adopt this model if it can provide the performance, right? Because essentially they're the same thing. It's just a different technology.
That's a huge if, though. That's a huge if there.
Well, I'm saying if. Well, if it's not, then there's even smaller point to do so. If this were like happening one day, those traditional centralized exchange can always adopt this model too, because essentially they're the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm very excited to see the dYdX experiment. I'm calling it an experiment because I think that's exactly what it is.
It's a very interesting experiment.
I'm wondering when dYdX people watch this episode.
They know they're running an experiment.
Yeah,
and that's exciting, man. Like I think they're trying to build something that hasn't been built before at that level, and they already have a successful product, but it's a trade-off of escaping regulation and kind of still, it's going to be interesting. I very much look forward. It seems like they're making a lot of progress on it, so it's going to be live soon, right?
Well, actually, I have a guess, which might or might not be true, but my guess is this try by dYdX is largely a response to the criticism that dYdX is fake DeFi, right? I mean, it is some centralized server running on AWS. You just cannot call that DeFi. Okay, they will say, okay, so if you don't think this is decentralized enough, then I can make it decentralized by adopting a blockchain. I think that's pretty much a response to this kind of a criticism, which I personally don't think is a right way to address that point. But
I don't think it's ego. I don't think it's ego, by the way. I think dYdX are specifically feeling threatened by the fact that regulation is coming in. While most companies are kind of like yielding to regulation, they're trying to build something that is fully censorship resistant. So I think they're really trying to do this so that it can never be regulated, which is why I think it's so important, right?
That's another consideration too. They need to respond into the regulation, but unless you switch to a really decentralized network like Ethereum or things like that, if you are just like adopting a Cosmos-based standalone application blockchain network, I don't think is regulation resistant. Well, I mean, how many?
We need someone from dYdX here.
Next time.
Like, if you cannot have like if you cannot have like as many as nodes to be regulation resistant, then it's pointless.
But my question is, okay, we are talking about regulation resistance, right? But look at what happened to Tornado Cash. Everybody who tried to build
that's another topic.
Right?
It's about like something that's already deployed on a very decentralized system, Ethereum. Then regulation can still do something, but we don't know the final result yet. It might like induce some new kind of a technology to come out, because right now I think the whole industry is pretty like against this. But it's an ongoing story. We don't know the end yet.
Then I want to ask a question. I think the audience or the general audience would like to know the answer is like, let's say I'm just someone who want to pick a really good DeFi protocol, but I don't know all the different technical difference. So what are your recommendations on me as an average user, right? How I should pick the best DeFi protocol for me, just for an average user?
My answer is very simple. I think DeFi right now is a very wild west, and I think it rewards the very curious people. What it also means is that we're not really at a stage where we can, in my opinion, I mean, I can recommend my own protocol, sure. I do that all the time. But I generally feel like as a user, you just need to try out some of the protocols. Like, I mean, try to understand what they're doing and try to figure out how you like using them. And you should never trust, like, I do this as a DeFi user. I never trust the new protocol with too much of my money, right? So I think it's a lot of trial and error. I think this whole preference of trade-offs are going to be evident as you're using protocols, right? Because only protocols have trade-offs. I think as a user, you get to choose depending on your level of, like, how much of an expert user you are, what you're looking for. Is it latency you're looking for? Is it like price, the slippage, or the? Depending on what you're looking for, you're going to find your favorite protocol. But I think the most important thing for a user is to be very careful exploring these protocols, and even for good protocols, like, it's very easy for things to get hacked. So managing your liquidity and so on, like putting money in, you have to understand the risks. And it, as long as you understand the risks, you can keep going forward. Now, I do think this narrative is going to change, but I think that's not today. I think today things are still very risky. Today, there's still a lot of protocols coming up, and people still need to understand what they're doing. That's one of the things I don't like about DeFi. Like, it kind of requires you to be a coder to some extent to use it. But it's it is what it is right now. So
warning.
Huge warning sign. Yeah. But once you start using it and you have good products you're using, then it becomes really fun because you're just doing things all over the place and yield farming and you're trying out crazy products and sometimes you lose money, sometimes you make money. It's a nice ride.
I think even those professionals or I would say insiders, they lost a lot of money over different protocols.
Myself included. Yeah, I mean it's part of the journey. Losing money is fun.
Now for the audience, losing money is not fun. Please keep your paycheck and everything. Save it. Okay. What about you, Alpha? What's your recommendation?
Well, I guess my point is similar. You always need to put safety first. But actually, for most of the people, for the few that are super tech savvy, you probably can check out smart contracts yourself. Well, this is conditional on the smart contracts or open source indeed, right? I think the percentage in this industry of people who can actually check out the smart contract, the code themselves, are very small. So for most of the people, you probably don't have the ability to check out the smart contracts yourself. But then you do need to depend on some of the other signals, factors to assess the safety of the project. So this depends on who audits that the projects and how this thing's presented, whether this project involves complicated technology. Because sometimes if something is too complicated, it's more likely that it could have accidents. That's a rule of not just for DeFi, for everything. So all of the things for that, well, you need to be reasonable about what you can expect from a project, right? If something is too good to be true, then it's probably not true, right? For example, 2020 DeFi summer, there are a crazy high APYs, but that actually also involves a lot of other risks too, right? So, and right now when the DeFi has already become much more mature than the starting stage, you need to be reasonable about what you can expect from the project. I guess that, so in insurance, safety is always the first thing that you need to consider about. And when it comes to the product performance, whether this is lending borrowing or this is a spot exchange or this derivative or this whatever, then you probably would know the good and bad yourselves, because you can know, okay, if this is lend and borrow, what the interest is, or if this is trading, what's the transaction fee, or what's the slippage is. You can feel that yourself too. You probably don't need our guides, but I would always say put the safety as the first thing that you consider when you try out something.
Too good to be true, Luna. 20% APY. I'm just kidding.
Olympus DAO was too good to be true, huh?
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So for my audience, see, even the two DeFi founders, they care. They will recommend you guys to be very, very safe on the crypto space, because I do agree with you guys. It's still very early. Even the project is founded by great team, great technology, but people make mistakes. And when the technology is too complicated or when it's not executed properly, then there will be problems.
Yeah, because for the last year, we've seen a lot of big names fail, right? Like Terra, Luna, this is one of the top 10 cryptocurrencies collapsed in 3 days. So nothing, well, I guess in the traditional finance, there is one phrase called too big to fall, but in the crypto world, there's nothing that could be too big to fall.
Is it because even though it's very big in crypto, it's still fairly small in the real world or in the traditional finance?
No, I don't think that's the reason. I don't think it's because the big in crypto is not big enough. I don't think that's the reason behind this. I think the real reason is too big to fall is That's not quite related to the topic today, but if we were to talk about this, I don't think too big to fall is a correct thing. Too big to fall is actually a very evil thing. I mean, if this thing should fall, then it should fall, no matter how big it is, right? No matter it's like some big banks, it affects a lot of big part of the economy. If it's problematic enough so that it should fall, then it should fall, just fall. And the reason that something is too big to fall is because the centralized government or the central bank is actually intervening into this game. So that something that should fall, they actually keep them floated. I think that's hurting the market, that's hurting the economy in the long run. And in crypto world, there's no such a thing as a central government or a central bank. So there's nobody to keep those who should fall afloat. So that's why there's no such a thing as too big to fall, which I think is a good thing in the long run.
Do you have anything to add on, Victor?
Yeah, no, I mean, I generally share the sentiment, right? I think there are certain things that are too big to fall by all standards. I think, like the U.S. dollar is secured by the biggest military in the world, so it's too big to fall. But I think a lot of that is just philosophical. It's like people having shared interest, right? I think in crypto, there's no such thing. There's no such crazy force that's external. So it's way more meritocratic, I guess, right? Like Luna was huge. Luna was like $90 billion, like $100 billion. Like that's definitely not small. That's huge, right? And it still fell because it didn't make sense for it to stay, right? And there's not even the big institutions that invested in it could keep it afloat. So I think that's something beautiful in DeFi. Now, I also think that some projects fall because of things that are very unfortunate. Like if you look at, for example, Nomad, the reason they got hacked was not because their technology sucked, was not because their team sucked. It was really just because of a very unfortunate configuration at the contract level. And, but that shows you that it doesn't really matter how good you are. You're a human being, and you can't shortcut anything, and it could be UNX. So I think it's a very rough environment to be in, but in a sense, it's also more fair.
Yep. That's the key word. That's more fair.
Yeah. I think fair. The word fair is definitely like very deep in every single one of the Web3 users or the builders, because essentially we are striving for a fairer world.
Okay, with either way, maybe we should have a phase 2 of this program.
Phase 2. And invite dYdX people.
dYdX, featuring dYdX.
Okay.
dYdX again. dYdX also a very, very good team. One of the best teams out there too. I think, like I said, I think what they're building is really cool. I think it's an experiment just because it hasn't been done before. But dYdX are definitely one of the teams that I think are pivotal. Like they've done so many things that are really well done. But let's see how that unfolds. I'd be actually very interesting to have someone dYdX just because there's so many trade-offs. Like when you're talking about so many
they are
trade-offs.
making choices. I feel like they are making really big choices. I would say a lot of times.
There's nothing more beautiful to talk about than trade-offs. So I think that'd be really, really cool. Again, a lot of respect for dYdX and a lot of respect for AMMs in general. I think, my general opinion, there's space for all these technologies, and I think we're still very early. Too early to know with the current liquidity levels. Too early to know what's really gonna dominate. So.
We will respect each other for sure.
Oh, we definitely should. Yeah, we definitely should. Unless you're Do Kwon. Do Kwon didn't respect other people, but
okay, that's for the chit chat part. I think that's for the chit chat part. We're gonna talk about all the engagement with Do Kwon. Okay, chit chat. Let's wrap up the interview first.
We should get Do Kwon to join next time. That'd be nice.
I can't. I don't think I get it. I can't. Maybe before, but not right now. So before we wrap up our interview today, there's a part that every founder gonna do is each of you guys have to share a fun fact about yourself. Who wants to go first?
Actually, I think when we started this conversation, I mentioned that digital nomad right now is that can that be considered as a fun fact for myself?
Explain it a
I've
bit.
been this digital nomad or crypto nomad status for like now almost 1 year. I basically started this last November. Then my first stop was Singapore. Then I went to US. The West, the East, and then after that, I also go to Dubai, Indonesia. Right now, I'm back to Singapore, but I don't know where I will be in. Well, I will be here for like several months, but I don't. After the several months, I don't know where I will be. So that's basically my lifestyle right now. I guess it's something fun about myself.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
I know it's a pretty good fun fact. I'm impressed that you're managing to stay ahead of internet. My biggest issue in traveling has always been finding reliable internet that I can use to do all the stuff. So that's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. What about you, Victor?
Yeah, but I think nowadays that's not too big an issue. Most of the places, as long as you don't go to two countryside place. Well, for example, for most of the countries that I've been traveling around, like Singapore, US, Dubai, these are very modern countries. I mean, you don't have that kind of problem.
But it depends on your requirement.
But even for
if you are streaming, let's say if I do streaming, I upload all data, then I really need high internet speed. Otherwise, like I couldn't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So probably for that, I'm not as demanding as as you would need in your job.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought Europe was. I mean, I'm from Europe, right? So I always thought. I'm from a country named Romania, and we've always been good at internet. So we've also been really good at thinking that every other place in the world is better than Romania. So coming out of there, I was expecting to see the craziest internet speeds, and then I was in ETC Paris, and I kind of made my way to Portugal.
Are you disappointed?
And I had a really rough. Very disappointed with the French internet, and very disappointed with Portuguese internet. Other than that, I think both countries are
really
absolutely lovely.
I need to cut this part out.
It's true though. It's true. But I love.
Really?
That being said,
I didn't know that.
Portugal is my favorite country in Europe. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But actually, Lisbon nowadays is hot for digital nomad, right? So are you saying they don't have a very good? I mean,
maybe that's why their internet was not that great, because there are too many people that are trying to use it and kind of like, create congestion.
You're saying that's a consequence of the fact
I'm
that
kidding.
There are a lot of digital nomads there.
I'm kidding. Maybe I was unfortunate, but Portugal was one of my favorite places. I totally recommend if you're looking for a new destination. I think by far my favorite country in Europe.
Yeah, I would definitely try it out because
Okay.
Yeah, because I have not tried. Because I have not tried out Europe in my digital nomad journey yet. So I've definitely tried it out.
Yeah, great. And Victor, what is your fun fact?
Well, I think I have one. I have a bunch of. I'm only going to use one because I know I'll keep talking to you, and then you'll probably ask me for more. But one fun fact is that when I was in middle school, I really didn't like going to class. I didn't like going to. I just thought it was a waste of time. So I would spend my time at home running computer science stuff. I was doing algorithmics and whatnot. But then whenever I was supposed to be in school, I would tinker on some bike project with my friend. So I kind of like gathered enough money to buy these dirt bikes, like hardtail, like regular mountain bikes that I use for dirt jumping. So then for about 2 years, I started doing BMX and kind of dirt jumping tricks on like dirt ramps and so on. So like crazy jumps and whatever.
Wow.
And I only got 2 scars out of it. And I never used protective gear or anything. I was a crazy kid, but I have extreme sports past. I think that's a bit of a fun fact.
Actually, me too. I love.
That's very cool.
But I will share my fun fact when it's my podcast. But I'm also like an extreme sports fan. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
Well, thanks everyone for listening to us. And I want to apologize again for my voice. I'm not at my prime today, but I hope that this had some sort of value added to your knowledge about DeFi and different protocols.
Or maybe become more confusing to DeFi.
Or maybe it's more confusing, but that's what the next podcasts are going to be for. So.
Okay, Alpha. your turn.
Yeah, I had a very happy time here discussing with Meina and Victor regarding all the different approaches of the crypto trading. Maybe we should have a phase 2 of this discussion sometime in the future. Welcome everybody to try out Deri Protocol. Come to our website, deri.io, to try out the future solutions and the powers, or maybe try out some of the other end products that would have Deri Protocol under the hood. Let's enjoy DeFi.
Thank you. I will make sure. Yeah, let's enjoy DeFi. I will make sure I will include both of your websites to the description. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.